Hello.
Hey Bradley, how are you?
All right. How are you?
Not bad. I haven't seen you in a while. Strange.
Yeah.
Hey Raj.
Hello, Raj. How are you?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Good. Oh, there we go. Vrushali, hello. So yeah, welcome back. We didn't meet last week. I canceled the meeting because both Raj and Vrushali were busy, and Jesse I think was heading out, so we didn't meet last week. But I did get the. I think I did get the extensions for your GSoC projects to October 30, so you check your portal to see if it's there, but it should be. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your updates here. We'll talk about some other professional development things that I didn't have time for 2 weeks ago. So, who would like to go first with their updates?
Uh, I'll go. Uh,
Okay.
is, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was actually preparing the documentation for the entire project.
Okay.
So I was just putting all these things together, then the Neurostars link, then the brief about the last year's project, and then the limitation that it's using NetLogo and then it's not really expandable and all that. And then why I'm using Python, why I'm using Mesa this year, then the basic architecture of the entire thing, that there will be a website followed by a agent based model. And then there is this instructions MD file that is just completely on how to set up the project and get it running. So actually, this week I was returning back from my university to my house. So I was like 2 3 days I was just traveling. So I as much time as I could, I'm just making this documentation for now. I'll send it in the Slack today or tomorrow for a review, and then from this week, like from now on, I have my vacation going on, and I'm at home, so I'll be more regular with my updates from now
All right. Yeah. What we're using for that Visual Studio code, or what was that to put the
on. Yeah, I'm
documentation
using
together?
Visual Studio.
Okay. Yeah.
Can
And
you
Yeah,
then,
actually be
oh, go ahead.
your README file? Oh, sorry.
yes, it was a README file. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it's just he's just working out the markdown file in there, but that's yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Um. Yeah, I'll make a because I'm just. We can go over the task board later, but I'll just put it on the task board. Like, I guess the task here is that you will update the README file with that information.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, I'm doing that task. Yeah.
Awesome, great.
yeah. I mean, well, we'll have docs. Like there will be a README file. We might make more docs later because we have a lot of projects have like the README and then they have the deeper docs where you go and you have like headings. So making headings and things. But that's just a matter of how we want to style it. So that's good. Looks good. And then, what about you were talking about reinforcement learning 2 weeks ago? Where does that stand?
Yeah, I'm yet to resume it. I'll resume it this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a bunch of background noise.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update. Yeah, that's great. And then yeah, well, next this coming week we'll be working on reinforcement learning and continuing with the docs. Yeah. Okay. Hello, Vishali. Can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can hear
Okay.
you all.
Good.
Let me share my screen, then I will explain what I did this
Uh,
week and
okay.
previous week also.
All right, Jesse. Let her share her screen, I guess. I don't know if she can share at the same time.
Enter screen.
Hello, Ankit. Okay. Yeah, I see your screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, this is what I did last 2 weeks. Actually,
Wow.
I did the model from Sketchfab was, but the meshes were not available and textures, so I add the textures and meshes here. And plus, I contacted the Z Anatomy organization and talked with them about our project, and they were like very excited to see how it's gonna end. Plus, actually, their site was disbanded because they are not able to afford the website uh, hosting, maybe. So they are closed now. They are actually on Discord only. So
Okay.
that's it. And here you can see the Maurice water maze, the little mouse inside, and water is flowing. But yeah, I will add the ripple and the mouse movement here. Actually, I did it yesterday, but there was some error, so I need to look at that and do it again.
Okay.
So that's, that's the whole. Let me show you.
And so then the thing on the right is what? Like just a regular space that they had. Uh,
Sorry,
what is the thing on the right? The image or the world on the right?
here,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is okay. Okay,
So that's the
here
whole.
is
Yeah.
tub, like Morris water tub, Morris water maze tub, and the mouse inside the tub, and plus there are some anatomy models. Uh, Actually, I'm gonna add the animation for like zooming out and other stuff, and UI also I added, but there was a little bit like not mm, matching the entire whatever model I have, so I need to delete it, remove these things.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, that's pretty good. So yeah, this is yeah. So that's great. What are your plans for this coming week?
I will add animation UI like the widget UI for the project plus the XR interaction toolkit. I will like XR stuff here. Uh, that's it. Like I will try to do these things.
All right.
So yeah, can you? I just missed some of that. So the next steps for you are adding animation to which part?
Anatomy models I have, and plus the naming of the specific things like the organs and other things individually, because these are all unnamed, so we cannot guess it what is it. Actually, I added the bot also, but there was some error. I don't know why I'm getting so many errors errors here, but like that bot will explain every single thing.
Okay,
But
so
Yeah.
adding animation and then naming the different organ components.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. UI also actually I did it last time, but the theme was not matching with the anatomy thing, so I disbanded that thing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
A lot of times your errors can be because it was made in a different version of Blender or Unity or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
So yeah, that's great. That's thank you for the update. So yeah, we're making progress and we continuing in the coming week. So um,
Actually, I asked for the extension last time, and I received email from the Google coordinators. So ask you one more time. So I am asking you again, can we extend the time period
uh,
if possible?
it should be extended. If you go into your portal, you should see it there. I
Actually, I did not check. Okay, I will
yeah,
check it.
because I emailed them like a couple days ago. The person was on vacation, and then I had to contact another person. So yeah, it should be there now, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they sent out an email about like evaluations, but that's only for the regular timeline. If we're extended, which we are, we don't have to worry about that. But the portal, you should be the source of truth on that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, October 23rd. So great. So hello, Ankit. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Great. Did you have anything you wanted to update us on or discuss?
Not really, but I think, talking a little bit in the chat with Jesse. Could you send me the link for every year? I think you post out the internship. So could you post out the internship description?
Okay.
Of what?
The link I think in your Notion page you update the position, the
Yeah,
internship position and the description.
right
Could you
now.
share that?
It's in. We always put it in Slack in the channel, and I'll put it here too.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And again, like I encourage Raj or Vrushali to add things to it as need be. I was actually going to go over the board next, the task board
Okay.
in GitHub, but I'll wait till we're ready for that.
Yeah. So is that all you wanted to say, Ankit?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for the update. Yeah. We discussed that in the Slack, but I think there was some confusion as to what the document was. But and then that's the document we're continually working on those documents for descriptions. So we're always doing new things, and we're trying to get the description to match that, because as we do things, we find out that we need to change direction or whatever. So we made some documents a couple years, or actually I think it was about 2 years ago now, where we spelled out what we needed for each project, like a description for an intern, and then those are out of date, I think now, or maybe somewhat out
Are
of
we
date.
talking about the intern postings now?
Well, we had some postings. We had some cards that we posted on social media, but we had some descriptions that are probably out of date. We'll have to check through those again and make more of a habit of that. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'm just pointing that out because it's not, it's not. Every time we offer these, it's like we always try to make it so that people understand what's involved before they jump in, or sometimes it's attractive to people, and we have to do an onboarding session, and it takes time to kind of get them to understand what we have here, what the project's about. So so Jesse, you wanted to talk about the board.
Yeah, just to comment on that before we go to other things. Things that I'd like to discuss Saturday will be, obviously I have a new project in mind that I'll talk about for the philosophy, history stuff, but also I want to try to finish up the mid-year report, which is kind of what Ankit talked about before, and also just thinking about description, or post things and descriptions and stuff like that for fall, because that's about almost here anyway. So that's more admin stuff though, and I don't want to talk about that too much in the meeting. But for things here, I'll share this again. This will work. It seems to be working. I just moved some stuff around, but I figured we can just go through this stuff. It sounds like the Morris Water Maze itself is pretty much set. I don't know if we can close that issue, but maybe just part one of it is done.
Yeah.
I assume that's kind of done. I think this is also done. I don't know if Vrushali wants to say otherwise, but I think I think we can close the issue now.
70%. Yeah.
Okay. let's say today. Right. Cool. Good. I'm gonna move that back to here. Midterm reports. I think we've all done them. Is there any, like they're kind of past now, so we can just close.
Oh yeah, those were done. Those were done a while back, so that's closed.
These are also done. There we go. I think the website's pretty much set too. There may be a few other things to add in terms of some of the. Oh, there were some other things to add, like other materials to add. I think.
Yeah.
But the major update is set, which is nice.
I can't remember if I got back to you about that.
I'm gonna check. I'm gonna.
Okay, yeah. Because sometimes it drop it. It's not often, but I'll occasionally. But it was. I don't know what level of granularity I wanted exactly. I can't remember where we left off, but I think like some of the links. I can make some notes on that too. It's kind of hard to make comments on it. HTML file though.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, is it hosted on GitHub? It's not hosted on GitHub, so that would be the HTML file. Yeah.
No, no, it's a Google site.
All right, it's fine.
So yeah. For this one, I forget if this is really slow for me. I forget if this is really happening. But I think Vrushali finished this update from like the end of June, so it was a month ago. I think it's set now. I don't know.
What is the README? Oh, yeah, it was for README. I don't know if Vrushali has a README in her documentation of any type in her repository. Do you have a report on that, Vrushali?
Actually, I added the README file last month only, and no any documentation yet.
All right. So yeah, the README should be done. I mean, we could actually just turn this into like documentation or create documentation for VR, because
after like the completing all the stuff, I will document. Like actually, I am documenting the things, but not published yet.
Right.
Yeah, I just saw this.
Right.
This has like I see this here. So there's some movement there. But yeah, if I think it like eventually putting the updates in this folder will kind of be the things you want to put your final updates and things here in our actual 2003 folder. So this is good. Go back to this one. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say for this, or do you want to make a different issue, or just close this one? I think this is set.
I mean, probably just we might like change the name of it to like complete documentation VR, because I mean, I know we'll probably be doing more before the end of the project, but we've kind of got the README in place. So documentation doesn't have to be the README like we talked about before. It can be more detailed, or if there's something, we want to reorganize it. I mean, it's always I'm always a big believer in documentation as a guide through the project, not necessarily just to put things in a README. So optimizing that is always important. But so we'll just say. Yeah.
Okay. I'll think about that a bit later. So new things: add animation, add organ name description, Unity shell. I don't know where we are with that. Is that I think that's something that we're still working on here, or I, I don't I don't know if this was ever fleshed out beyond that.
I think Vrushali would know. Or
Yeah, I guess what's the status on this one? I know something we talked about before, but it wasn't fully fleshed out in this description. So
yeah, it's kind of hard to know what that actually means. That's the thing. But yeah, I don't know.
So Vrushali, is the Unity shell something you're still working on, or what's the status of that?
Actually, I don't remember what the Unity shell is. So can you just click in and show me the description? What's the Unity shell is?
It may be a non-issue because I don't know. I don't really. I feel like it was put here and then there was like a request for more specificity, so maybe it's not an issue.
What was the date on it?
It's open last month. So
yeah, it might be something we visited and then decided not to go in that direction. So yeah, yeah.
that's fine. Um, cool. So Morris Water Mazes, I think in progress 70%. I'll do this discussion a little bit later today. These other ones here, we talked about that. I guess that's in progress. Upload UI assets to GitHub. I think that was covered in something else actually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's this is sort of like, this seems like a general task and not a specific issue. Like this is like a recurring thing. So I don't know if there's.
Oh, I think it was just that we had mentioned that Vrushali should have all the UI stuff and assets in GitHub. And whether it's her GitHub or the lab GitHub right now, it's not so important, but just to have them in GitHub.
Okay, I will do it.
Okay. So yeah, I guess it'll still be open for now, and then we'll. Yeah.
Okay.
Raj, are you working on the README for that open source seminar? If yes, then we can move it to the progress.
Yeah, I am working on it. Yeah, I guess it can be moved to in progress.
And what about this demo? Is that still a thing that's happening, or what's up with this?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'll update you when I'm done with it.
I think that was it. Okay. I guess this is in progress too, isn't it? Or is it? I don't know. Doesn't really matter for that. So I think anything else we want to put on this as a task to do or something we're aiming for, now that we're kind of past the halfway point. We have these. I think at some point Bradley and I maybe can go through this and just create a backlog of specific things to hit, like that Google will ask for, and populate the backlog just to have them listed out here in tasks. But we don't do that today. I guess I would just say before we go on anything else, is there any other tasks we want to note that are in progress or working on that we want to do just to keep track of them for any of the projects?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think this is good for now. As we get closer to the point where we get to submissions, we'll have some specific things, maybe like a checklist to have for submission. But that's later on. I don't know how do tasks or how do issues handle checklists. I seem to remember that that's something you can do.
Yeah, like, is this it? What you can do? Well, let's go through that right now. What would be a good thing to make to demonstrate this with? I'll make one. I'll just do one for myself, just to have it. We'll make documentation for professional development stuff. Why not?
All right.
Just kind of for theoretical results, just to show this. So yeah, I'll send this to me. Yay. But if you're going to make checklists, there's also some fancy ways where you can get like visualize the percentage completion stuff. But for the sake of it, I move this. I can't. Is this it? Yeah. The dash and then the brackets will give you the checkbox thing.
Yeah.
But I'll do it like this. Whoops.
Oh, you're just drawing
Little double.
check boxes, or
Well, if I'm hitting return, it will automatically put one in here,
oh, okay.
and you'll see like once we come here.
Yeah.
So what I can
Okay.
do is, check once that's done, I can check that off, and I can also tie it to where did it go? Oh, let's see. This one was 33. So I go here and do, because I'm in the same hashtag for the project, and it's an issue within that project or within that repo. It will kind of automatically, like, it will link it here. So it currently shows that too. You could also basically just do a list of tickets, which might be a cooler way to do it. Like, you could say write-ups issues. Whoops, that's not how you spell. So you could say like, I could make a new issue, which I won't do right here, but this is maybe a little bit complicated. It needs to be for now, but you could have the issue on one side and the actual task of doing the write-up on the other, like this. So this is what you're doing with this. This may be even more technically, and especially if you're using ZenHub, this might be called like a milestone or a project or something where you have an issue, but the issue is like a macro platform where you can see all the other things that you have written out too. And keep track of it that way. So yeah, like now you can see, okay, this one is done. On the issue side, if the issue is closed, this issue is open. But I haven't yet written up the write-ups for each issue hasn't been done yet, which I could make their own issues, but I'm not going to do that here. At any rate, like this could be a list of things for me to do in sense. So just a very brief tour of how you could set things up using both the checkboxes. And I don't think if I do that, it would close the issue. There could be a way to relate them, but I don't remember right now. Anyway, so that's pretty much it for the board. I have a brief discussion about like professional development, workplacey stuff.
Okay.
I don't know what you wanted to do in general.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that for about 15 minutes, and I can finish up.
So it's basically story time, and this week's story is the setting of, a few weeks ago we had a discussion about the page review feedback method, which I don't think really says much here. That's exactly right. I'm not going to go back to that for the time being, and I wish I had a better some kind of interesting thing to share for this one. Not so much.
Yeah.
I may just try to share. I'll just take notes in the Notion and share that as I'm doing it.
All right.
It's over here. So this week's stories come from a real life situation. I'm gonna make sure I set myself a timer so I can see it. Basically, there was the context is you're at a generic job and you have your one-on-one check-in. One-on-one check-in is something you might have with a manager. You might have, just to kind of see where you are, and it can happen relative to other goals in the organization. In this case, the HR department is setting up a new metric for like how do you evaluate progress, or how do you determine if someone's meeting their goals, or like how should they evolve in the company? What's there are some mergers and changes, and HR is trying to set up this thing, and so the one-on-one is kind of in context of doing that, or precursor to that happening in the organization. And I mention that specifically because sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, even though someone's a manager or a professional in an organization and has experience, they may be not good at scheduling meetings or doing meetings. And so it might be confusing. They may change the meeting time around a lot. They may do all this stuff. And it's sort of like, how do you show either leadership or just involvement when managers are kind of strange at that time in setting things up? And I guess the takeaway from all of this was sometimes you'll have a meeting or a one-on-one with a manager, and the manager might not really clearly set expectations for what should happen in a meeting, or they may offer something very generic, and it's like, oh, here's a generic strategy, and they'll kind of talk to you about it, or talk at you about it, and then you're left like, it may just be an unclear situation, like, oh, I don't know what to say here, or I don't know what to do here, and you have the meeting, and maybe you're not really prepared for it, and you kind of just go through this meeting, and maybe you don't really articulate anything very clearly, and then the meeting's over, and so you've kind of had this somewhat potentially important meeting. You had a one-on-one with the manager about the future and about your role in it, and you don't really know what do you do in that situation. You kind of, maybe there's a sense of, geez, I wish I said something, but you don't even know what to say. So I guess that's sort of the background, and the discussion points I would make briefly are, what do you do? How do you turn that situation into something useful? So you have a somewhat clear, potentially messy meeting with a supervisor, and they don't necessarily know what they want, but they have to do this meeting because of some, bureaucratic reason they do it. And what do you do when it's kind of a mess in there? And I think this is an example of showing both leadership and kind of business or whatever savvy to take that and go from it. Like, where do you go from there? So in the case that I'm talking about, what happened is the the individual and I kind of discussed what was going on, and it was really confusing to sort out, like, okay, what do we do here? Because there was this very particular formula for like goals being set, and it was just like, here's how we set goals, and not really attaching it to what do we do with these goals. It was just felt kind of bureaucratic and empty. And as much as possible, sometimes, um, I think the how to turn this into something constructive, and that's sort of the question. And what we did in this case was, okay, this is really unclear, but we know there's a major business problem. The major business problem or task is HR is um, setting up a new procedure for how to help people be onboarded, how to help people, whatever. Um, like understand the pathway of development for any person's career. So it's like, okay, how do we talk about that? Um, and after discussing the meeting, the individual and I kind of concluded, okay, maybe what we do here is we talk about one of our specific the individual's job has to do with training other people in some extent and bringing them, kind of doing onboarding to some extent. I'm kind of being vague on purpose, which I realize is maybe tough to talk about. But it's basically saying, how do we find something related to the major business goal at hand and talk about it in a way that shows we care about improving a process that would affect the major business goal. And in so many words, we found that the individual came up with a suggestion to improve something. And we're in a situation where, okay, the individual has a suggestion for a process that would affect the major business goal. Why I say feather in the cap is that, especially in like contemporary workplaces, you really have to represent yourself and show the work that you're doing. Sometimes even showing that you're thinking about something, regardless of whether or not it's going to be implemented. And what I mean by that is there will be times where, especially in like more obvious corporate environments or environments where your boss doesn't really know what you're doing or doesn't know you very well, a great boss will really try to represent you and understand your efforts and represent your efforts to other people. If you have a boss like that, that's amazing. That's a great thing to have. But a lot of times bosses don't know how to do that or are interested or too busy or whatever. And management can always be a tough situation. So how do you represent yourself? And how do you, ideally, and this is, an ideal, but how do you go from this is kind of a strange way to say it, but it kind of comes down to that. Like, how do you go from kind of a messy meeting to picking out a suggestion and an idea, and carefully saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this," in a way that's both like respectful and aware of what you're doing, because there's it's it's quite possible that the suggestion that the individual here came up with was considered to some extent before, but there's a huge difference between these things. Um, this is a little bit shorthand, but But what I'm getting at is there's a major difference between there were after we kind of broke down the meeting with the individual that I'm talking about, it kind of came through that they had this idea. And it's like, okay, this is an interesting idea. And we thought, what do we do with this thing? And it was kind of a moment of, well, the manager probably already thought of this strategy somewhat. And I was like, yeah, they may have. But it's sort of like, does the conversation end there? Because if that's, oops, sorry, I just stopped my timer. So I forgot where I was. I think I have like 5 minutes left or something. Is that right? Or
Yeah, a couple minutes.
Okay. I'll wrap it up here, basically saying when you try to untangle a meeting and you have a business goal, and then you find, okay, here's something I could say, but you do a lot of the work thinking about it, but then you just say, oh, I'm not going to share that with anybody because it's probably already been done. That's a very different thing from indicating and kind of like showing that you're doing the work of caring about stuff. Whereas if you can turn the idea into a format or even a discussion that you would like to have about the idea with management or with whoever, with a supervisor or collaborator, whoever it is, at least that way you are saying, hey, I am I'm thinking about the business problem. I care about the process. I want to improve the process so we have a better product or outcome or procedure or whatever it is. And so I feel like it's a real art to sometimes being presented with weird meetings that are, these bureaucratic things that have to happen. But if you can take from that a semblance of, hey, here's my idea, and then you get to this moment where, sometimes you'll have an idea. Sometimes you have a really interesting, innovative idea. And what you can do is basically request to talk about it with the right person just to see what they have to say. Because it's a difference between not commenting on anything at all versus showing interest or showing that, hey, I'm curious about how this is working. Can we talk about it? So what we concluded with in the situation is, number one, we had a follow-up email to the one-on-one. We had a follow-up email to the one-on-one manager, kind of restating, almost bringing a lot more clarity to what happened than what actually happened in person. So sometimes it's even good to just do that, like a generic follow-up email saying, hey, thanks for making the time. I know we had busy schedules and we had to change it around, but we made the time to do it. That's great. I understand we made the meeting, and then restating kind of the frame of the situation. I understand we had this meeting to talk about this and also the major goal of the HR stuff, etc. And then saying, context, schedule, and then basically showing to the manager, I'm aware of this goal and I have a potential solution I'm interested in thinking about more, discussing more. And as a kind of a bonus thing that I'll just vaguely allude to is that sometimes if you do have a really, really, really good idea that you're unsure will be buried or lost, or if you're particularly like concerned that other people will scoop the idea, what you can do is also just try to you know how there's a concept of doing an informational interview with a job? You can kind of do informational interviews with ideas too about certain people and ask, hey, what we ended up doing in this situation is basically requesting a call with another manager or another person in the arena who has who's an ally, who like knows and respects the individual. But it was a way of kind of saying, hey, I might have a really, really, really good idea. and I want to show that I'm thinking about it and make sure that if it comes to being, I get credit for it. Because sometimes in some environments, people will be very happy to say, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. Don't. I don't want to hear that," and then they'll turn around and do it themselves. So that's a bit of like higher level diplomatic, defensive strategy, but it's something that's to be can be aware of. But this is a bit rambly, and I apologize. But basically, the to summarize, you may have some strange meetings in workplaces. They may be bureaucratic and unclear, but when you're handed situations like that, sometimes what you can do is show leadership or understanding of the problems by saying, "Hey, I understand this is kind of what we were meeting for. I understand there's a business problem. I have a tentative solution I'm thinking about that I thought about or refined, or maybe didn't articulate very well during the meeting. But if you don't articulate it during the meeting, you can still follow up later and say, "Oh, I'm still thinking about this," and then you can kind of go from there to make a strange situation potentially into something like that could be a feather in the cap of, "Hey, well, no, geez, I had the one-on meeting with Jesse. It was kind of weird, but he sent me this. We didn't really talk about much, but then he sent me this email and had a really good idea. So I know Jesse's concerned about making things better. Something like that. That's kind of the story for today, anyway. So I'll leave it at that for now, and
Okay.
open any questions or comments about that.
Oh yeah, it's great. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I know it was a bit vague, but I kind
Well,
of had to be vague about some of that. So I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I know. You had to redact. So I guess I have one comment, which is that, yeah, we don't talk. So the reason we do a lot of these Notion documents and things like that is because you do find value in going over meetings and kind of extracting things out of them as you go. So I'll take notes during meetings, and then also, like, sometimes you'll play back a recording or you'll try to summarize what was said. And sometimes, that summary isn't because you're doing a redundant thing. It's because you want to make sure that you understand the flow of the idea that you were interested in. So if you're interested in, say, a discussion in one of our Saturday meetings, and it's maybe about 30 minutes long, there's usually a lot in there that isn't you maybe need more clarity on, or maybe you want to follow up on something. And going through that kind of these kind of motions, I think helps there too. Obviously, Jesse was talking about making hay out of a confusing situation, and you don't want confusing situations. More often than not, in organizations, you can have confusing conversations about things. Sometimes it's because you're just kind of in between brainstorming and like kind of a formal idea, but other times it's just kind of like people are talking past one another. And so all those things are very important. And one way to get around that, of course, is to sort of analyze your meeting or your discussion and say, this is, maybe go through it, maybe, write out notes, like write out an outline of what you thought was said, and then think about it, and maybe get feedback from other people. So I think this is great. This is actually great for like conflict resolution, for kind of getting ideas out there, or digesting some of the things that were said in a meeting and making it useful, but also for like working through problems. If you have a discussion that's just kind of like ad hoc, or it's a very broad discussion that you're pulling together a lot of ideas, how do you move it to that next step? And often it's not easy to know how to do that, because you just figure, well, we'll have another discussion and we'll build on things. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. So, yeah, I think this is a great discussion of this. Yeah, so why don't we move on to the other thing I wanted to do
Yep.
this week? And that is kind of go through these papers that I wanted to follow up on. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about these sort of pieces of advice, these these articles that kind of give advice on different topics. And so we talked about a couple last time, which was why science needs more research software engineers and what software companies can do to tackle R&D lag. So we were talking about software engineering specifically, but then also the role of research and development in like organizations and how software people can help. A lot of times software is about R&D for an organization, but sometimes of course software is about just software design or project design. And so, but this set of readings is a little bit more academically oriented, but maybe not, because it kind of gives you like a bridge between the R&D part and like the act of doing research. So when you do R&D, you're doing development, but you're also doing research. And so the research component, we do in this organization focus a lot on that, so these sort of mechanics, because you get a lot of people who come from backgrounds where maybe they haven't been exposed to research very much. And so I know in our internships last spring, in spring of 22, we had a lot of students who wanted to get more research experience, and they were able to get this kind of research experience. But it involves a lot of different moving parts. So the first one is The Science of Scientific Writing. This is an article that is for students, and it kind of talks about sort of writing for a technical audience or a scientific audience. So if you're working in an organization as a programmer, maybe a research programmer, or maybe a software engineer or software designer, more generally, you're going to be writing technical documents. You write technical documents, you kind of figure out, well, how do I do this? And they're programs where they can generate a report for you. But to really be effective, I think, in these kind of positions, you have to know how to really write your results up so that people can read them, not just your peers in the R&D world or in the software engineering world, but people outside of that world who make decisions. So sometimes you'll be called upon to make like a summary for an executive who doesn't know that much about the specific technology you're working on. Or you're going to make it for like an outside audience. Like we're talking about documentation. Documentation needs to be at least two levels. It needs to be at the sort of the high-end technical level, and then it needs to be at the lower general audience level. So, I mean, these are kinds of things. I mean, for your projects, I don't think you really need to do that kind of differentiation, but I think for a lot of like releases of projects where, you have a user base, but you also have people who, you have a user base that's sort of casual. They want to install the software and maybe play a game, and then a more technical base where they want to actually modify things. This is what you need to have. So this kind of talks about how to write a scientific paper, scientific results. This holds for technical results as well. And so as you can see, there are a lot of ways that you do this. You have to sort of think about the reader, think about their expectation and their context. Sometimes they're well-versed in the very specific area that you're talking about. Sometimes they don't know anything about it. So you don't want to dive right into the details, nor do you want to insult their intelligence and kind of explain everything to them very, very simply. So, one thing is, you can maybe make a list of, like, say, variables and their values, or you can make a table. So, I mean, those are things that a table is visual. It helps you understand things more clearly. There are different formats. There's also, putting the information in place. So, if you're putting in different descriptions of things, when you write up results, usually you describe things in pieces. So if you're doing like an API, you describe the API. If you have like a connection, how to connect something to a computer, you do that. How to access files in the cloud, you might write a piece on that. And you write the pieces, organize the pieces in a way that makes sense. Maybe it's in sequential order of how you do the operations when you install the software or whatever. And then there are these, you have to structure your language. So, in scientific writing, it can be this passage is a passage from like a biochemistry paper, I guess, or molecular biology paper, and you can see that like if it's a block of text, but it's not just a block of text. It has a lot of acronyms. It has a very dense structure, and so scientific writing is dense by nature. But you want to make sure that you don't put like lists in there when maybe a simpler description will suffice. So you want to really optimize, so this is the optimized paragraph. You want to optimize things for readability, and you don't want to put a lot of redundancy in. But then and then like if you need to define these terms, what the human URFs are, you might not do that here. You might put a footnote in, or you might describe that earlier and say, see this section, these sorts of things. So there's a lot of writing. There are a lot of writing tips here. There's a lot of so this is the stress position. It is a linguistic commonplace. The readers naturally emphasize the material that arrives at the end of a sentence. We refer to that location as a stress position. So you want to basically backload or sometimes front load your sentences or your paragraphs. So there are ways to organize your words or your descriptions to match sort of the way that people read documents. Now, that's just one example. I have some other resources here on scientific research in general. And this is the importance of stupidity in scientific research. I think one time I posted in the Slack, there's this idea of ignorance is a good approach to science. And so that's actually a book by Stuart Firestein, who's written a book on how you approach scientific research from a position of, I want to find things out. I don't really want to have preconceived notions as to what I'm doing. I want to find things out. I may have a theoretical background, or we want to know things about the thing itself, how it works, but we just really kind of approach it from the standpoint of ignorance. And so he describes how to do that. This is the importance of stupidity, which talks about sort of the way that I'd like to suggest that our PhD programs often do students a disservice in two ways. First, I don't think students are made to understand how hard it is to do research. So this holds true for R&D as well. How it's very, very hard to do important research. And then, you have to do you have to learn things in order to really kind of do research. But you don't want to necessarily be locked into any one position or another. You want to be able to experiment, but you need to have a mastery of some subjects. Just don't shy away from subjects because they're hard. If they're relevant to what you're doing, you need to know about them. You need to understand them. We don't know what we're doing all the time. And in fact, we don't know what we're doing most of the time. We don't know if we're asking the right questions or doing the right experiments until we get the right answer. So the other thing here is that, it's really, if you have the good first principles, you can do a lot of this experimentation and you can make sense of it. And so this is something to keep in mind. Second, we don't do a good enough job of teaching our students how to be productively stupid. That is, if we don't feel stupid, it means we're not really trying. So, it's like we don't... I'm not talking about a relative stupidity. I'm also not talking about bright people who might be working in areas that don't match their talents. So you need to, in science or in research in general, you need to confront our absolute stupidity. In other words, we need to know what we don't know. And we need to admit that we don't know something so we can find the right answer. We don't want to just make things up as we go along, because that's not what research is about. So that's that paper. Then, there's how to read a paper. So when you're doing this kind of research, when you're finding things out in the literature, often you have to read papers. And so that's the currency of research. And so this is on how to read a paper. And so this paper gives information on how to read a technical scientific paper. They use this approach called the 3-pass method. So that means going through the paper 3 times. The first pass gives you a general idea about the paper. The second pass lets you grasp the paper's content, but not its details. And then the third pass helps you understand the paper in depth. So when you get a big technical paper, you don't want to just blast through it and say you understand it. You also don't want to like kind of just shy away from it and say I didn't want to, I couldn't tackle that paper. The best way to do this is just to do this 3-pass approach where you sort of go through and you get a sketch of what it's about so you can describe it to someone else. And then the second pass is getting like pieces of the content, maybe going through the figures and reading those. And then the third pass helps you understand the paper in depth, go to the technical details. But only do that when you understand what this is about. So, this has more information in it, but I'll post this folder in the Slack so you can read these papers on your own, or read these documents on your own. And so related to that is a blog post on how to seriously read a scientific paper. And so this is more of the same, but it's a little bit different advice. This is from Science Journal. Again, you don't read it from beginning to end once. You kind of go skim it first, and then you might go to the figures and tables. And then once you understand what it's about, what they're trying to do, then you get into the technical details. And so you do this multiple times. Sometimes, a lot of groups, research groups will have a journal club where they present a paper. So you go through the paper, you present it to your peers as someone who's just read it, and then you have a conversation. And so that helps you understand it even more. It's kind of like what Jesse was saying, but in the case of like a paper that's very dense. So we have these very dense artifacts that we embrace in research, and we try to understand them. We try to understand nature as well with experiments, and it's not easy. It's sometimes very hard to get at. And then this is the final one here, is Chaos in the Brickyard, which is about how we do research in terms of assembling bricks. We call the bricks facts. When the bricks were sound and were assembled properly, the edifice was useful and durable and brought pleasure, sometimes reward to the builder. If the bricks were faulty or if they were assembled badly, the edifice would crumble. This kind of disaster could be very dangerous. And so it holds with research. If your research is built on a sturdy foundation of bricks or of knowledge or facts, then you can move up to the next level, which is building things or, finding things out through experiments and so forth. So you need to know how to write a scientific paper. You need to apply that knowledge to these other types of investigation, but you need to have this foundation in place. And so this talks about sort of chaos in the brickyard, which is like, how do we put these bricks together? How do we identify flaws in arguments that exist? Sometimes if the scientific literature is written in such a way so that it exposes a flaw that maybe no one else has noticed. And that's the place you find to maybe do experiments and to find out more, and maybe find out why there's this flaw in the literature. Sometimes it's just, the literature is pretty good, but there need to be next steps taken. So that's also a thing. But you need to have that foundation in order to get at some of these other parts of research. So research is sort of a scaffold where, you're starting out with a set of knowledge, a set of first principles. It's usually in papers or in presentations. You build upon that, you understand that, then you move on to experiments, you move on to building things, and then, you can, have like these cool things, but you have to have this basic, and then you also have to you have to communicate it to people. So you have to make people understand what you've done and what's going on in the world relevant to this, so that people can understand what it is. Like one of the things about like a lot of modern AI papers is that they don't cite anything before 2018. It's like they say, well, we did this, this, and this, and the literature review is kind of like, well, we start with Transformers in like 2020 or 2018, and we move on, and then it's like, well, people were doing things before that. There's other things that are involved in this. What is the context here? So that's my spiel for today. I'll put those papers in the Slack. Jesse, do you want to say something before we go?
I was just gonna say no. I was gonna say some of those, because I'm looking into things like I talked about expert writing here a few times, and all of those things fit with that concept of like, what are the writing in the audience. So I just want to see those papers, but No, it's good discussion, and I think, as an aside, I'm building out more and more like admin infrastructure to talk about this in a different way. So it's just nice to stay here. But that's all for me. Yeah, that's all.
All right. Well, thanks for meeting. Talk to you next week or tomorrow or whenever I see you again.
All right. Take care,
All right,
everybody.
take care.
Bye.